Hey, soccer fans, welcome back to the Feed the Fire podcast. I am your host, Nick, decked out in my finest University of Illinois sweatshirt, getting ready for the NCAA tournament. But there's a lot of Major League Soccer and just a lot of soccer to be talking about as well. The US Open Cup kicked off. Speaking of tournaments, tons of games going on that you can catch all on the US Open Cup's YouTube channel, I believe. There's CONCACAF Champions Cup, where Vancouver had a huge upset over Monterrey, and we'll see how maybe that factors into their next matchup against the Chicago Fire. There is a lot going on with the club, with the organization, but we're going to focus in on this episode about recapping the Toronto FC game, some of the things that we saw that are encouraging, some of the things maybe we still got to work on a little bit. And also, we're going to take a preview of the Chicago Fire's next matchup. They're staying north of the border. They are going across the continent, though, to Vancouver to take on the league-leading Whitecaps. And we're going to talk about all of that. I first want to share just a couple housekeeping matters. First off, if you want to get in touch with me, you can email me, glasshouseSoccer@gmail.com, and you can find me on social media at glasshouseSoccer. I want to thank our sponsor, Skira Icelandic Spring Water. They sponsor our halftime, our water break, and our segment from our special guest, John Donovan, who's going to be giving his thoughts on the Fire and their match on TFC about halfway through the episode. And also, I want to share, let's share one quick story here real quick. So if you're listening to the show, you know I'm Greek. I'm a very proud Greek person. And on March 25th, we celebrate Greek Independence Day. So all my kids also all attend Greek school. They take Greek cultural and language lessons. And so this week we had our Greek Independence Day program, and my son was wearing a traditional Greek outfit, except we didn't have a belt to go with it. And he needed like a red belt to go with the red vest. So we improvised. I grabbed my Chicago Fire Return to Red scarf that I got at last year's jersey kit reveal, tied it around his waist, and he had this great looking red belt to hold around his very traditional Greek costume. And then as he walked by, you could see behind the little Chicago Fire logo sticking out the back of it. So we had a little bit of a fusion there of Chicago Fire and Greek culture here at our church's program. So it was really fun. We had some of the other parents cracking up. It was a really good time. So I thought you would all appreciate hearing about that. But now, speaking of the Fire, to segue into our discussion after this TFC match, let's look at the Chicago Fire power rankings and where this match brought the Chicago Fire, according to some pundits over at MLSsoccer.com. Now, they have the Fire still pretty far down the power ranking chart at 19th. And I always thought power rankings were more of how hot the team is in the moment. And the Fire have won 2 road games. I would expect them to be a lot higher up than 19th. But here's what they say. It's by J. Sam Jones. And he rehashes. And it's funny because we see a lot of the MLSsoccer.com writers who I'm hoping Alex Calabrese gets more space on the website, because we need some people who actually know the club and don't just rehash the same old jokes like is in this article, because it says to the flow chart. They even acknowledge that they're rehashing their jokes. I can see it. Oh no. Oh yikes. No. Well, maybe nope. But let's just, okay, immediate no on that. But what if we tweak this? Like the whole joking about how the Fire will, build you up and break your heart, kind of a thing. Let's move past that, MLS writers and MLS pundits. Even it may be accurate, but we need to get a little deeper right now, especially because they flipped the roster and because they have new coaching staff, all these new things going on. We got to get away from that kind of narrative. Whether you think it's accurate or not, we got to get away from it. But here's the actual content and thought that went into this. J. Sam Jones says, 4 games in and we're still hanging around the first. I can see it. They picked up their second road win in a row by taking down Toronto 2-1. They've earned 7 points through 4 games. Yeah, those 7 points came against DC United, Dallas, and Toronto. And yeah, they're second to last in the league in expected goals allowed so far per American Soccer Analysis, but still, I can see it. All right, well, he puts a little more meat on the bone there, that the Fire aren't exactly beating the top talent in MLS, and they are allowing a lot of goals. However, you got to think back to that opening match in Columbus where the Fire were beat 4-2. You also have to remember the Fire have conceded 2 penalties this year. Neither of them were scored on, but still, that's going to, I think, overinflate the XG. I'd like to see the non-penalty kick XG stats and maybe measure the Chicago Fire by that rather than including what is pretty much a plus 1.8 to a plus 1.95, maybe 1.9 of XG by factoring in those PKs. So I'm not exactly sure I buy the analysis as far as the statistics, but yeah, they've had a relatively easy schedule, I would say, against Toronto, DC, Dallas thus far. But he ignores the Columbus game, and then he ignores all the hype that Dallas had got preseason anyway. So, you know what? The more I think about it, the more I'm like, nah, the Fire seem legit. They seem legit at this point, and maybe I'm talking myself into it, but they do seem like they belong much higher, at the very least, than 19th in the power rankings, which, by the way, Vancouver is now in the top spot in the power rankings. So the Fire are getting them just in time to knock them off and prove themselves a little bit more. Now, if you want to maybe a little more optimistic approach, you jump over to ESPN's power rankings. They have the Chicago Fire in 15th. Now, I never really promote ESPN as much of a good soccer coverage, and it's funny, their top 8 teams in the power rankings are just the top 4 of each conference. So it's not like they're putting a whole lot of thought into their analysis, and each team is only getting a couple of sentences, if that. I mean, even the Red Bulls, who they have ranked 14th, just says another week, another draw. Like, that's their analysis of the Red Bull. Like, they're not even trying to write a power rankings article here. But for Chicago, they had them at 18th, and now after beating Toronto 2-1 in Toronto, they have them at 15th. And then here is what the ESPN article says, penned by Megan Swanek. Greg Berhalter's squad picked up their second straight win of the season and a 2-1 victory over last in the East, Toronto. No matter the opponent, 2 straight wins is solid momentum. Unfortunately, Chicago plays undefeated Vancouver next week. And if we jump up to the Vancouver rankings, they do not mention the Vancouver section. They do not mention their next opponent being a streaking Chicago Fire, just saying that Vancouver is now 4-0, the best start in club history, and is only the 7th MLS team to start a season with 4 straight wins. So Vancouver also coming in hot. We'll get to that preview in a little bit. So what got the Fire to that point? This 2-1 victory over Toronto, which looked a little shaky to begin. DeAndre Kerr puts the home team up 1-0 in the 11th minute with just a great play and a great header, good teamwork. Bernadeschi and Osorio are credited with assists on this play. Another kind of defensive breakdown on a counterattack and allowing the wide player to have time to pick his passes out, to pick his crosses out. But thankfully, the Chicago Fire are not the same team. And that's why I don't like using that same narrative of, well, will they, won't they? Look at, they're better. Now they're not. Because they are not the same team. The same team, the same old Chicago Fire would not have come back on the road to score 2 second-half goals. To score 2 goals to beat a TFC team. And they scored them both in the first half. So they were up 2-1 at halftime. The same old Chicago Fire team blows that lead and at least gives up a draw, if not 2 goals to concede and lose all points on the road. So this is not the same Chicago Fire team. At least I haven't seen it through the first 4 games. There may still be some residuals of that same old Fire, but the responses to those situations are different, which makes me think that this is a different team. Again, the roster suggests it is, the coaching staff suggests it is, but now we're seeing the play on the field and the mentality suggest that it also is a different team. Now, looking at the stats of that game, are we seeing a different Fire team? They had just over 51% possession, not something the Chicago Fire have typically done, especially on the road to a TFC team with the likes of Jonathan Osorio and Federico Bernardeschi. The Fire also put up 11 shots, 4 on goal. The defense blocked 4 shots. The Fire had 500 total passes at an 87% accuracy. That is a great possession by the Fire. And what I'm seeing in the possession is it's not like it was last season where when the Fire do have a high percentage of completed passes, that they're just knocking it around the back line, trying to figure out what to do, or when they're attacking a team who is sitting deep and trying to just bunker and counter, and the Fire are just kind of knocking the ball around and recycling it in like a half circle pattern around the top of the 18-yard box. I'm not seeing that. What I am seeing is the Chicago Fire having some deliberate movement with their passes to create space and to create an attacking pass. And what do I mean by that? This is something I coached my youth team on. They just call it the wall pass. So when the defenders have it, when the center backs typically have the ball, or when a defensive midfielder has the ball, and they're in the attack mode, they're trying to progress the ball, they're facing the opponent's goal. You have those counter pressing or pressing opposing players. You have those midfield players trying to lock down on them. So what do? You don't want to dribble through them. You don't want to start passing the ball out wide in your own defensive third or defensive half to that aspect, to that point, because that's when they can press and that's when they can corner you, almost kind of like running a half court trap in a basketball game. Just to harken back over to our NCAA tournament mentioned earlier. So what you want to do is kind of bring the ball a little bit up the middle and play a wall pass. And a wall pass is just what it sounds like. You play the ball off a wall, it comes right back to you. So a center back will play the ball up the middle, almost into pressure, to a central midfielder who immediately plays the ball back. And what does that do? Yep, that's going to add an easy two completed passes. It's going to add to your percentage. But what it's designed to do is pull one of the pressing players just out of position enough where then you can either hit that pass back to the midfielder who now has space to turn because the player marking them continued to follow the ball back off the wall, if you will, or it allows them to play the ball into the space vacated by another player who gets pulled out of position by that wall pass. Or if both players collapse onto the center midfielder in this circumstance, in this example, then you can kind of play it wide and around where those two opposing players are. So all you're doing is trying to draw the opposition out of position and then attack that space. Again, whether it's through a pass to the same player, whether it's attacking the space off the dribble, whether it's now being able to play a couple of quick passes, something we haven't seen the Fire do until this season, play quickly, switch the fields quickly, and they're looking to switch the fields to Zinkernagel and Bamba. And you see when Zinkernagel gets pulled more into the middle of the field, that's when this kind of breaks down. But when he stays wide and doesn't have to come in and defend or try to get involved in the play, when he stays wide, when Bamba stays wide, and our defensive midfielders and our center backs are looking to play the balls out wide to them and spring them, or when our wingbacks are getting involved with a little 1-2 with the wingers, that's when you see how this works. So yes, the Chicago Fire in the past have had games with high passing accuracy, but it has been passing without a purpose. And now I'm seeing them doing some of these things. Call it Berhalter ball if you want to. Call it possession based. Call it playing it out of the back. Whatever you want to call it. But they're passing with a purpose. And so I'm not going to harp, at least not right now, on these higher passing percentage numbers because it's a different way they're getting to these higher percentage passing. At least that's what I'm seeing. And again, to give another example of it, of how you want to play it, think of the goal kicks now. Instead of either sending it long or having the goalie play it wide, short but wide, you are seeing the center backs playing the goal kick to the keeper in the middle of the box. And why is that? Well, if the keeper were to play it to a defender, now the field is unbalanced. The ball is off to one side, and that invites in the press because now they're cornered. And the only option is either to play it long or to play it back to the keeper. And we've seen, in the past how a team like St. Louis could take advantage of those bad back passes. Whereas if you play the ball from the left or right side of the box and the defender takes the goal kick and plays it to the keeper, now it's a balanced field. The keeper has the ball in the middle. The opposing press has to stay balanced and a little far back. And so that allows Chris Brady to either look to see, am I going to play it long? And I'm going to play it up to Osorio centrally. And we've seen that come back to bite the Fire once this season. And they're getting better at it. But, he's got to play that. Osorio has to play the wall pass. I'm sorry, not Osorio. I'm thinking TFC. Orahel. Orahel has to know to play the wall pass. The one that bit him in Columbus, he tried to make the turn and ended up losing the ball. Whether or not there was a foul there, he's got to play that back or immediately one touch it out wide to the wingbacks. So now that the Fire are working on that, they can try to unbalance the opponent and counterattack. And that's one of the things that we did see them do positively over the last few games, over the first 4 games, is when they do get, they're being patient, and when they do get the opposition unbalanced, they are counterattacking. I'd like to see a little more from Zinkernagel and staying wide and advancing it, but the Fire are doing it well. The other thing the Fire did really, really well in this match was Orahel playing those long balls over the top to Kuipers. And but for Kuipers just shipping it a little wide and the missed PK. I mean, Kuipers could have had a hat trick in this one. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Kuipers at the end of the show, because Bradley Wright Phillips, former great MLS striker and now current broadcaster, he has noticed Kuipers' form lately and wrote a little something online about it. We're going to talk about that. Getting back to the statistics of the TFC Chicago match, Chicago ended up with 3 corners, only 3 total crosses, though, 2 offsides, 10 aerial duels won to Toronto's 9. Their XG was 1.6. Brady was only credited with 1 save, though the defense had 7 clearances. The team committed 11 fouls, but no cards in this match, thankfully. I think the game was called very, very tight, which maybe benefited Chicago in certain aspects of this game. And yes, the referee called it tight both ways, and you could probably make a good argument that TFC's goal was offside, but the Chicago Fire also benefited from a VAR review. The Kuipers' goal that was called back for interference for a foul on Sean Johnson, I think that was real weak. That was definitely Johnson milking it, pun intended, and getting the call there. However, I think the game was called very tight, so it didn't allow Chicago to get emotional and physical and get a little outside of that patient tactical passing game. So I think that probably helped them in certain aspects. If you want to look at the momentum of the game, the Chicago Fire had their momentum was the end of the first half, and that's where they got their 2 goals. They dominated the last 20 minutes of the first half, and then it was a pretty balanced match in the second half, teams going back and forth with opportunities, and the Fire were able to see it out. Again, something you don't really see from a Chicago team of years past. Next up, we're going to listen into John Donovan's segment, his recap and thoughts on the Chicago Fire and their match versus TFC. I want to remind everyone that John's segment and our halftime water break here is brought to you by Skira Icelandic Spring Water. Skira Icelandic Water. Skira means clear, and it comes from a government-protected nature preserve in Iceland. Clearly, pun intended, it's one of the best, and Skira Icelandic Spring Water is available at your local 7-Eleven. So, John, take it away.
Nick, John Donovan here talking about the Chicago Fire and the MLS. Nick, I couldn't be more pleased than the Chicago Fire team that's on the field right now. You know, the preseason people had the Chicago Fire sort of in the middle, and Philadelphia, they were convinced that they were just going straight down. Well, guess what? Philly hasn't lost, and the Chicago Fire are playing beautiful soccer. I am so impressed in this last game. That midfield, you think last year under Klopas, last time I'm going to say that name in this podcast, but under Klopas, we virtually had no midfield. We had too many cards. It just was so much confusion with different formations, guys playing different positions. It was even hard to follow as a fan, much less as a player. Today, old Greg has put together a 4-3-3 formation that everybody knows. It makes sense. It puts pressure on the defense of the other squad. Kuipers is having a ball out there with Bombia. I mean, those two are rocking and rolling. And I tell you, this last game when Dean got hurt, who I'm a fan of Dean, I think he has a place on the bench in a lot of MLS squads. But this Leonardo Barroso, dude, the guy can run. I mean, he gave away a goal, almost a goal, and you could see that his heart was down. But the guy has got an amazing speed. He brought, I think it was one of Kuiper's goals was off of one of his crosses, and he just outran the guy and skipped it over right in front of the goal. Tremendous player. But What I want to rave about after this last game, and I'm sure the team itself is really wondering where they. I mean, last year they virtually had virtually the same guys, but it's just the formation. But the midfield of Pineda, Gutierrez, and Orgel just makes sense. Pineda played that position at North Carolina at center mid, and you can see this is where this cat should be playing. For me, it would be a big question of Acosta or Pineda. Both of them are strong in the middle. And Horiel, I love what I'm seeing at this guy. You can see mentally he's with the game, and he's doing what a center mid like the guy for New York. I can't remember his name, but he is always available. They brought him out of retirement to come back to New York to pep up their squad, but the Fire just never had this under our old coach. Today with Oriel, Gutierrez, and Pineda, they've got some real talent. And then in the backside, Brady is going to struggle this year. He'll be a better goalie from working under our coach. He's going to fit his short game, those passes out to the wings. That's where a goaltender really, you can see whether they're good or bad. And I know Brady's working on it. It takes a lot to play for Baltimore. He's a tough coach, is tough on the goalie, but it's really coming together with the Fire. I kind of hope that they hold that DP spot for next year. They don't need it this year. Rogers in the back is working out beautifully. We don't see any cards on him. Terran wasn't even on the bench, so you got to wonder what is wrong with Terran. But right now, the squad's playing well. It was a tremendous win just to watch them not just grind it out. They played it out. Don't think the referees had a great game, but my players of the game obviously would have to be Kuipers. Pineda, I've always been a fan of his. He's a local kid. And Leonardo Barroso, man, this guy can go. Now, unfortunately, the guy that didn't have a good game was Dean. He got beaten on the goal. He got hurt on that goal, too. Just because you're short doesn't mean a guy can get position on you. Kerr scored over him, but in all honesty, Dean was on the wrong side of Kerr. He could have stopped that. I think it kind of all the movement kind of confused him, and he ended up with a guy that's about 6'3" or something. But again, he was poorly positioned. We'll have to see how that position plays out in the future. But folks, if you're listening to this, watch the Fire. I think we have a team this year. All right, Nick, thank you very much. Hi, Mike. Hope everything's going well with everybody. Take care. Nick, John Don.
John, thank you so much for another great segment. Your breakdown on the goal and discussing Dean's positioning on that was fantastic. I think you're absolutely right on that. Jonathan Dean, if he is going to be playing at the starting MLS level, has to improve that. That's something that I put out on Twitter while I was watching the game. Like, why is Jonathan Dean defending a header in the middle of the box like that? Like, is he being pulled out of position? And it looked like he was being pulled with, and he was tracking Kerr on that play. And I don't know if the Fire wanted to play man-to-man, if they wanted to play zone in those instances, but they've still got some work to sort out a little bit of that back line. And part of that work is going to be figuring out how to upgrade on Jonathan Dean. And I'm trying not to alienate the Dean hive here, King Dean and his fans. But that is something that was pretty glaring, at least in that instance. So, John, thank you for that. A couple other quick things before we look at our Vancouver preview. Something I've commented on, so I want to make sure that I follow through with it. Commented on Chris Mueller's availability for the Chicago Fire. He has been out all season for a non-injury reason, for a personal reason. I forget the exact designation on it. But he did have a child right before the season started, so people were speculating he was on paternity leave. And then after a week or two, he didn't come back and play. And they were still wondering, well, is it an extended paternity leave or is he being shopped around? And that's why he's not playing. There's a lot of speculation, but it has been reported by Men in Red 97 Media that it is a non-soccer related issue. and it is not paternity leave. The club has asked the team not to speculate and told it is a personal matter. So thank you to the guys over at Men in Red 97 for clarifying that. And I think that's exactly what we should be doing, is let's respect Mueller's decision to have a little privacy and handle that rather than put any sort of more speculation out there. And I will certainly do my part to try to do that as well. The one other kind of fun note that I mentioned earlier was Bradley Wright Phillips taking note of Hugo Kuipers. And he put out an article on MLSsoccer.com just today, Wednesday the 19th, where he picks his early favorites for MLS Golden Boot. Now, he lists Ty Baribeau from Philadelphia. He lists Christian Benteke, the defending Golden Boot winner. He lists Brian White. Again, these guys, and it's great to see Brian White, the leading scorer, I think, on the Vancouver team, who's top of the league. Christian Benteke, who is one of the best scorers, but doesn't play on a very good team. You have Ty Baribeau, who's the leading scorer on a surprisingly good Philly team. And then you have Hugo Kuipers. Where does he fall? Is he going to be a Benteke who's going to get all the goals on a bad team? Or is he going to be more of a Brian White, of a Ty Baribeau, and be the leading scorer on a good team who scores a lot of goals and doesn't just get all the goals for a team that doesn't score many? That's kind of where I'm wanting to see how it all shakes out. Bradley Wright Phillips also gives honorable mention, I'll call it, to San Diego's Anders Dreyer, Rafa Navarro of Colorado, Emmanuel Adeloth of Atlanta, and a handful of other players. But what does he specifically say about Hugo Kuipers? He says, I'm bullish on Hugo Kuipers' chances of keeping pace. The Chicago Fire's number 9 has bagged 4 goals, scoring in 3 of his team's first 4 matches, which tells me he's getting into a rhythm and taking his chances well. And yeah, like we said, he converts that PK and gets that chip. That's 2 more. What interests me about Kuipers is that last season he scored regularly, 10 goals and 2 assists, even though Chicago struggled. Now they've improved under Greg Berhalter, winning more games and creating more opportunities for him. Kuipers has Brian Gutierrez, Philip Zinkernagel, and Jonathan Bamba. He's low-key been one of the best winter signings thus far, feeding him, and he's shown his well-roundedness with hold-up play. Most of all, and I say this as a compliment considering how many ugly goals I scored in my playing career, I see Kuipers scoring the scruffy sort of goals that you need. Those are no accident. He's consistently getting into the right areas and is second on the scoring chart as a result. That's Bradley Wright Phillips' analysis of Hugo Kuipers. So in sum, Kuipers is getting more service, better service, and is scoring in a variety of ways. And that's why he is a early favorite for the Golden Boot. Couldn't have said it better myself, Bradley. Couldn't have said it better myself. All right, the next thing, let's transition now into our preview here. The Chicago Fire are heading over to Vancouver this weekend to take on the Whitecaps, the league-leading Whitecaps, the surprising Vancouver Whitecaps, who are sitting atop of the Western Conference in the league here, and everyone is shocked to see that how Vancouver is doing so well, probably except for the people in Vancouver. But how are they doing it? What are they doing it? Let's take a look at the roster like we've been doing. Since it's the first time they've matched up with Vancouver so early in the season, let's take a look at how they have changed the roster over this past offseason. Players out. They declined a lot of options, such as goalkeeper Joe Bendick, forwards Levante Johnson, and Fafa Picault. Picault, fortunately for him, ended up at Inter Miami. I know there were some calls in Chicago, or people calling for him in Chicago saying, hey, we should get Picault. This guy's a vet. This guy's a winger. But with Bamba and Zinkernagel, I think we got it covered. They also declined the option on midfielder Alessandro Schopf, and midfielder Ryan Raposo was out of contract. They did not re-sign him. Deber Caicedo was transferred to Junior FC, so another common MLS name there, a Vancouver Whitecaps name, transferred, and then goalkeeper Max Anchor is on loan to Pacific FC, and Stuart Armstrong, midfielder, was transferred to Sheffield Wednesday. So they moved a few household names, moved a few guys who put in a lot of time for them last season. So who did they bring in to help replace it? They're bringing in from the back goalkeeper Adrian Zendejas on a free transfer. They're bringing in defender Tate Johnson from the Super Draft. They've brought in midfielders JC Ngando and Ralph Priso, former players that they did re-sign. And they've brought in some strikers. They got Daniel Rios on loan from Chivas, Emmanuel Sabi on a transfer from Le Havre AC. Ooh, let's see, what league is that? Do you guys know what league Le Havre AC is? They're in Ligue 1 in France, currently towards the bottom of the table, 16th. So they're a League 1 striker. And they also brought in Jaden Nelson from Rosenborg BK. Rosenborg, again, a team I got to look up. They're a Norwegian club, and Jaden Nelson, you remember him, I think, coming up with Toronto. So they've brought in some attacking talent. That's where they have looked to bolster the team. But who is getting it done for them? It is really not any of those guys. If you want to look at their player stats, you've got Sam Adekugbe, who's got 2 goals, Tristan Blackman with a goal, Ryan Gauld with a goal, as well as Tate Johnson with a goal. So it's not Gauld and it's not White who are crushing things up front for Vancouver, but where Brian White and Ryan Gauld are putting numbers up, it's on the attack. Brian White has 12 shots. Ryan Gauld has 5 shots. So they are definitely the focus. And Sebastian Berhalter, by the way, you want to call it the Berhalter Bowl here? Greg coaching against his son, Sebastian, who plays for Vancouver. He's also involved in the attack with 5 shots as well. So these White and Gauld are still the focus for Vancouver. But yes, you have Adekugbe and Jaden Nelson, who leads the team or is tied with Pedro Vite with 3 assists as well. So they're starting to mix it up. I think they realize they can't rely solely on Gauld and White, though those guys are their stars. Those guys are their high-profile players, but they are starting to complement them a little bit more in this style of play that they have thus far. Now, there is going to be some lineup changes though for Vancouver, and it's going to be good and bad for the Fire because of it. Let's look at their former lineup, and then I'll tell you the news here. So Vancouver is coming off a 1-0 victory at Dallas, where Tristan Blackman had the winning goal there. You also got to remember Vancouver has been playing CONCACAF Champions Cup. They had that great upset against Monterrey to advance to the next round. So that is going to help the Fire a little bit. Some tired legs, perhaps. But here's how Vancouver lined up against Dallas. In goal, they had Yohei Takaoka. They played a 4-3-3 formation with Matthias Laborda as your left back, Ranko Veselinovic and Tristan Blackman as your center backs, and Ediera Compo as their right back. Across the midfield, Sebastian Berhalter, Jean-Claude Ngando, and Andre Cubas. And your attacking players were Ali Ahmed, Brian White, and Pedro Vite. So that's how they started the match. And then they were able to bring in Jaden Nelson, Jivan Badwal, Daniel Rios, Brian Utvik, as well as Ralph Priso. So their subs were all attacking players, all midfield, all striker players. So they definitely want to have a very attack-minded lineup and a very attack-minded mindset. And it was the goal they scored against Dallas. It was in the 54th minute, and these subs. Just want to make sure I check the summary here and make sure my suspicion is correct. But I would suspect these subs all came in after the 54th minute. Yep, the first sub came in the 65th for them. Jaden Nelson coming in. So they're up 1-0, and then in the 65th minute, they bring in a new striker. And then in the 78th and 9th minute, they bring in new striker and attacking midfielder. So you know what they're trying to do. They are trying to press. They are trying to run. They are trying to be high intensity, high energy. And thankfully, the Chicago Fire have gone up against some opponents like that already in Columbus and Dallas. And hopefully the defense is going to get sorted out just a little bit more, having played together and having seen a game out from the lead and not giving it up in the second half. Or hopefully they can avoid the early goal and then forcing Chicago to go on the offense and being susceptible to a great Vancouver counterattack. So that's hopefully what the Chicago Fire can do. I think that's what the Fire have to do to win. Similar approach to the game in TFC, since you're the away team. Can you weather the first 10 to 20 minutes? And I felt so bad. I hope I didn't jinx it. In the TFC game, I started writing a tweet that said, Fire have weathered the storm for the first 10 minutes, and then they get scored on in the 11th minute. So hopefully they can at least get to that 15-minute mark, 15 to 20 minutes, and then grow into the game. But what was encouraging from that Toronto game is that they gave up the early goal, but continued to grow into the game. They didn't change their game plan. They knew their game plan is going to score them 2 to 3 goals. And then if they can just only give up that 1 or 2, they're going to walk away with the win. But here's what I was talking about as far as what's going to affect the lineup and be good news and bad news for both teams. We have Nations League coming up. USMNT is taking on Panama, and Canada is taking on Mexico in the Nations League semifinals. That means that Brian White will not be available for Vancouver this weekend because he was called into USA camp as one of the strikers. So Chicago is going to be down. I'm sorry, Vancouver is going to be down Brian White. So that helps the advantage there. Also, I haven't been able to find an updated injury list for Vancouver. I feel like Ryan Gauld might also be out with an injury or some other reason. Don't quote me on that. But then the bad news is the USA also had 3 players pull out of the Nations League game. Anthony Robinson, Johnny Cardoso, and Austin Trusty due to injuries. So who did they get to replace them? Jack McGlynn, Brian Gutierrez, and Max Arston. So the Chicago Fire are also down one of their starting stars, attacking players. Then again, if Gutman keeps scoring and Barroso keeps scoring, then that could probably make up for Gutierrez's absence. And yeah, by the way, Gutman made it onto the team of the match day for Major League Soccer. So now we have had a Chicago Fire player on the MLS's team of the match day for 4 weeks in a row. I'm betting that's a new Chicago Fire record, but I don't have the stats to back it up. I think that's just a good feeling. So, yes, Vancouver Whitecaps are probably going to be down Brian White, maybe Ryan Gauld also, but Chicago Fire are probably going to be down Brian Gutierrez because of their call-ups to the USMNT 4 Nations League. Along those lines, Amari Glasgow also called up to the Guyana national team for Gold Cup qualification matches, and so I don't know how much time he's going to miss from the Chicago Fire. That call-up is March 21st, so that is a Friday. I doubt he will be back ready, fit, and available for the Saturday matchup against Vancouver. So that is something to also keep in mind from the Chicago Fire perspective. All right, that's everything I wanted to get into. Thank you so much. I have been swamped at work, so we're doing a review preview one show this week, and hopefully we can get back out to some different content next week and get back to the dual shows and get you through your work weeks. Thanks to everyone who has emailed and sent messages, who's followed on Facebook and Instagram and connected over Twitter. Anyone who's subscribed on YouTube, I get the notifications. Thank you so much. We're continuing to grow the YouTube viewing audience as well as the podcast audience. Thank you, everyone. And as always, let's go Fire.